you are really strong in for your wellness and what areas maybe need some attention. And so that gives us an idea of, I talked about, you have the desire, we know the ideals, and this gives us a bit of an idea on what we can work on to get to the place that we want to be.
And I think that's why Paul and I really decided on taking our education kind of that one step further, not just with the yoga piece, but also with a life coaching piece, because it really helps bring together how you create the goals to take those steps, right? It's great to have a goal. Hey, I want to make 100,000 by next year. But then how do we get there? Like, what's in our way? If we're super stressed all the time, we're probably not being able to manage that goal of even managing the pieces. So that's why we brought in that piece of life coaching, just because it's a great way to throw ideas back and forth with somebody that's a little bit more objective. Sometimes we can do that with our partners or our family or our peers, but often they have a picture of who they think we are and what we should want. So it's kind of nice if you have somebody that can be a little bit more objective and look at it from a different viewpoint to allow you a little bit more space for that area of discovery.
So that brings us to our topic today, which is community leadership. And the reason why we talk about the wellness wheel and the wellness, and ask you your ideas of wellness and talk about our philosophy, because it is all connected. And the rural mental health piece is really about how do we connect all the dots and bring this to the community level. And so we thought that community leadership would be a perfect place to start a webinar series with the Rural Mental Health Project, because it is a way for those who have this desire and vision and inspiration to connect with others and give back to the community. So our philosophy around leadership today is in an informal way to lead. And so being a leader within your community is basically about establishing a vision for yourself. And then through your example, through your practice and your continued persistence and consistency, then you will be able to inspire others. I mean, obviously there are formal ways to be a leader within the community, and that can be teaching a class, volunteering for certain organizations, or even within your job. But there's also ways that you can do this in just everyday life, and that's what we want to explore a little bit more tonight.
Absolutely. But we really do believe that without understanding the aspects of mental well-being, it's very hard then to determine where you might land to try to be that leader within the community. And we believe, as we had stated with the rural mental health, we really are all in this together. This has to be a community effort, because I may know some things about finances, but I would certainly not want to be responsible for making decisions for other people about their finances. So why not go to somebody who has that background, right? You're obviously going to get better information. Maybe not all of the information just from that one person, but certainly maybe more credible information than just maybe myself. And that's the idea of us being all in together, that if we can bring in all of these different people that have these skill sets, that we can then help people find their way, find the steps that they need to attain the things that they want.
Absolutely. We want to be able to be curious about who's doing what in the community, who is that undiscovered gem of a person that has all these things to contribute, and how can we use them to, I guess, as leaders as well.
And I think what is interesting, we've been sitting on the impact committee, and it's been named a few things across the years, but always the basic intention is about the mental health and well-being of our community and like communities. So, but often what do we see at the table are the same people that are there. Not that that's a bad thing. You always need those people that are willing to stay and willing to have the conversation, but it's really important to bring new voices to the table. And that's what I like about the rural mental health piece, is this is giving us an opportunity to expand that, because we know people's time is also precious. There's, if you're working one job, two jobs, have a family, all of those kind of things, it's a lot to fit in just 24 hours. So sometimes it's hard to be able to then go to meetings for mental well-being or things like that. But that's why we're saying that's not what we need here. We just need people that are in their lane of what they can have to offer. Maybe they just have a passion about something. Obviously I bring up gardening lots because that is something that I love to do. But that's not my profession per se, but it's certainly with my passion, it's something that I can maybe help coordinate something, bring something together for people because it's what I love to do.
And I think as leaders, it's important to realize that other people might be searching for support in certain areas. And if you have that ability to offer that support, you have the knowledge, you have understanding of what people are looking for, you could be a leader just by supporting others to work towards their goals. And Shannon and I did a lot in our schooling about leaders and managers. And this kind of brought me back to some of those readings and that exploration around wrapping your mindset around what is a leader. And I had put that picture up before with, helping the others up the mountain. And I think that's important, that a leader is right in it with the people that they're supporting. They're walking beside them. They're not at the front telling people what to do. I mean, obviously that's, in the typical sense of leading a class, of course, we have to have people that are at the front leading, but this is that informal setting when you're supporting and guiding and championing, what I'm trying to say, others to be able to work towards their goals.
And I like, because there's some very well-known leaders in our world. We hear them on the news and all of that all the time. And most of your successful leaders will always tell you, you don't need to be the smartest person at the table. You just need to bring in the people that have the smarts or whatever it is that you might need. And you're just a part of the team. So really it's just somebody who coordinates a team. But even in lots of our quotes, that's what we see. You're not a leader if you don't have anyone following you. So if you can't walk the talk along with the people, like in Paula's picture, you're not leading anyone. You're just out there on your own. And our hope is to build people in a way that they do have people that are following because they're inspired by what they see. They're willing to be guided, not told what to do, just guided, because sometimes we just need a little bit more information maybe to get something started. And that's what a good leader does as well, that sometimes they put the pieces together. My sister and I always say that. She always says she's the idea person and I am the worker person. And I do think that that is very much the truth. She has many inspirational things to think of, but she doesn't always know how to put the pieces together. And that can be a little bit more my forte, I like to put the pieces together so that we can accomplish something. So we have lots of those people. I think by keeping an eye on the purpose, you can avoid politics of who is leading. Absolutely, Janet. I think you bring up a great point as well, that obviously everybody has opinions, has personalities and character, and it can create the politics, right? As to what you're saying. People have different agendas as to why they're there. That's not always a bad thing, as long as it can kind of be kept in check, that we're not using it as a platform, but the platform is about the community first. And whatever draws people there, that's okay, as long as we all still have the same collective idea in mind.
And going back to that community leadership versus organizational leadership, this is almost like the informal and the formal practices of leadership. So leaders don't have to be coordinating events. They don't have to be setting agendas and all of that. They can simply just be walking alongside. To become a leader, you don't have to have, like Shannon said, you don't have to have all those ideas. to be able to help others. And in Shannon's example, her sister might have the inspirational ideas, and Shannon's the worker behind the scenes. But you probably go back and forth with who's leading, Shannon, and I think that speaks a lot to our wellness, because on a good day, you might be able to carry the load, and then on a day where you're not feeling as well, then the person that's walking beside you can shoulder some of the load. And I think that's something that we forget about leaders, is that they don't have to accept all the glory, right? The leaders don't have to be the ones that are the spotlight is shining on. Often leaders are walking behind as well, and just keeping everyone moving, and being those cheerleaders also.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to stop sharing, Shannon. So if you want to keep talking, I just have to access that video.
The video that we're about to show is just a brief explanation about the idea of leadership and some of the great leaders that, their ideas behind what makes a great leader. So I think it's just a nice short little 2-minute video talking a little bit about that, and then we'll just dive in.
As an expert in leadership.
Oops, sorry.
Students.
Go ahead.
And
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
leadership is a practice. I don't believe that anyone is an expert in leadership. We're all students. And some of us are more advanced students than others, but it's something that is ongoing. It is literally a practice, and that you have to show up and try and be a better leader every single day.
Yeah.
And so every leader that I admire, and some of them have achieved amazing things. I mean, you're hearing from some of them today.
Yeah.
Some of them have achieved amazing things, and they're all curious. And when I sit down with them, they all go like this, you know. And I'm so enamored by that no matter how much they know and how much they've accomplished, they want to know. They know that there's more to know. I just recently.
You're never too old to learn.
No, but I mean, I'm talking about the you know, Richard Branson, Howard Schultz,
Yeah.
like all of these guys that I've had the opportunity to meet. They're all insatiably curious, and they all know that whatever they've done, they know there's so much more they don't know. And the ones I'm suspicious of are the ones that go, I think I know what I'm doing. I think I know.
So you don't know what you're doing.
No, I'm learning as I'm going, as we all are. And I think the big mistake that people make about me is that my organization runs flawlessly. It doesn't. My organization has all the same problems as every other organization. We make mistakes. We make stupid decisions. We make short-term decisions. We have employee things. The thing that I pride myself on is how we address those problems. That we err on the side of patience. We err on the side of empathy. And we work very, very hard to practice the things that I write about and speak about.
Yeah.
But the problems are all the same.
Yeah.
It's how we address those problems that I think is where the practice of leadership comes in.
Mute myself first. There we go. I think that Simon brings up, some of the great leaders, that curiosity piece that Paula was talking about, the insatiable learner. Those are such important things, and we can all be that. That doesn't matter whether we're a CEO of a company, or where we work or we run our own business. And I think that's the great piece of it. But we've had like definitions across times that I really appreciate. Like leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. That's kind of that myself and my sister piece, where Bill Gates, he says, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. And I think that's that absolute team approach to things, as opposed to thinking that you're leading and you're the one making the decisions. You're kind of all in it together, and you've empowered people to believe that they can be as much the leader as you are. And Drucker also says the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. And I think that goes back to Paula's picture. You're not leading anything if no one's willing to listen or willing to help or willing to be there. Then you need to step back and assess that piece. And maybe it's like Janet was saying, maybe there's some political pieces that are brought into that. So we all have to do that. Nobody's perfect in this. It's always sense of learning when you're looking at leadership. And finally, Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, because that's how you empower people. They're willing to listen, um, and they're willing to come to the table because they believe they have something to offer, and you've given them the platform to offer it.
So I guess the burning question of the evening is how to become a wellness leader yourself. And I think Shannon and I have talked about this a lot because I think over the last 10 years that we've worked together in the Human Service Agency, we've tried many different ways to be leaders for wellness because we were on the wellness committee and there were only 2 or 3 of us at a time in our office. And so we at first thought about the activity piece. If we provide the activity, people are going to come and they're going to learn how to be well. They're going to learn whatever we put out there. And we didn't just go to the physical wellness. We did try different avenues. We did seed planting. We did so many different things. And we were still getting the same couple people out there. And I think often they were only coming because they were friends of ours and colleagues and coworkers, and they really wanted to support us. I don't think they really cared what we were doing. And so we were putting all this effort into creating these activities and promoting these activities, planning them to have nobody show up. And it was just really frustrating, but very eye-opening on why we're putting this out there and creating these opportunities for people, and they weren't coming, yet they were screaming about essentially that they wanted to be well and they wanted to feel better and they wanted to develop this in themselves. So we just couldn't put the pieces together on why you want to develop your wellness. We're giving you the ways to do it, and it's just not working. And so we had to take a step back after we went through some phases of, well, fine, nobody wants to come, then we're just not going to hold any more activities. Nope, we're not going to be on the wellness committee anymore. That's it. We're done, because it was a lot of time out of our day. And then once we got past that stage of grief, essentially, of people not wanting to follow us, we decided that we would take a different approach and just continue on our own wellness journey. And we'd often talk with people, I guess subtly. I don't think that they were realizing that we were supporting them. And so, for example, if we were sitting at the lunchroom and someone talked about, I really need to get out there and walk. Oh, our comment might be, and I say ours because it was usually both of us kind of tag teaming. And it's like, oh, well, hey, I really want to get walking too. Do you want to go to the walking track? We could take a 15-minute break. It wasn't that far from our office, and people would start to join us in that. And we were doing it because we wanted to develop those things in ourselves as well. And through walking beside people on their journey, we were able to, I think, generate more interest and really keep people moving along their journeys, because we weren't telling them necessarily what they should be doing. We were just simply creating our wellness practices and inviting them to join us. Hey, we're going to a yoga class tonight. If you want to come, we're going to the 5:30 class. Sometimes people would show up, sometimes they wouldn't, but we still continued just developing what we wanted to develop. And we began to see that we were inspiring others to find what worked for them, whether it was people going to a paint night or getting together as friends, and they were talking about it in a different light than just socializing. It was something that was building on their mental well-being. And so it really was a process of discovery for us as well.
And I think that's such an important part, again, is, even in the rural mental health perspective, is why we need to walk beside people, why we have to give voice to everybody that's involved, everybody that is looking, because if we're there telling people, we're no longer providing the avenue of leading, we are moving on to that operational management of, hey, here's what you need to do. It's not that we can't support people if they ask you the question, but if you haven't built up, like Paula was saying, your own mental health and well-being, and becoming that role model for that, that's what drives the credibility for people. And I think for us, that's what people were seeing. We're walking the talk. If we say that, you know what, I think my nutrition is slipping here, and Paula and I would challenge each other. We wouldn't necessarily put that out to everybody, but then if somebody would ask, you say, yeah, this week we're doing a fruit and vegetable cleanse for 3 days. And then somebody else say, oh, could I join? Well, yeah, sure. Why not? So we're walking the talk along with them. We're not just saying, hey, we're super healthy. We're this, you can't join unless you're going to join at this level kind of thing. And then also offering the options. Maybe it didn't need to, maybe they weren't prepared to do the fruit and juice cleanse for the whole week, but they wanted to try it for 2 days. Awesome. That's a great beginning.
And I think we really saw that movement from activity to engagement, like Shannon was talking about earlier, is that we were able to have more authentic conversations about our wellness, but about some of our challenges as well. And I mean, it's just natural that we're going to have challenges because we're human beings and that's just what happens. But it was conversations about how do you get through them. And we started hearing people saying, as well as, asking how they could support us. Hey, do you want me to text you when I go for my walk in the morning? And if you feel like it, you can come out with me. And so that's when we started to see it coming full circle, that we were accepting and having people support us as well as being with support. That was really, I think that was really instrumental in us moving forward with some of our wellness practices also. So this is just, we would really like to get your input on some of these questions. It's just a way to maybe think about things a little bit differently. So again, we won't use the annotate feature for this one, but if you want to take your mic off and just share, or if you want to throw something in the chat, that would be great as well. So when we're talking about how to build that leadership, because it was easier for us when we had almost like a captive audience with our coworkers in our lunchroom, right? We had the ability to naturally have conversations about wellness. But if you are a community member who either wants to maybe inspire the broader community, or even if it's just your circle of people in your life that you want to be a wellness leader for. So do you have that desire to make that improvement? What does that mean to you?
And I think, like Paula said, what I like about it, just because if you're choosing to become a leader and want to be that person that is inspiring others, doesn't mean that you're now committed to it for a lifetime, or you've taken on some nutritional aspect or support group aspect or a gardening thing. That's the beauty of it. It's to be able to build up other people's capacity as well, so that, like Paul said, if you've got other things happening, work's too busy, life's just too busy, you have people to hand that off. That's what keeps it sustainable. And truly, that's what we're after, is building up all of these people within the community, that the load isn't on just one person.
Mm-hmm.
It's always can be very agile and move around as people need it.
And just by asking that question, you're not committing to anything. We're not searching for leaders here, and we're not committing you to anything. It's just opening that dialogue and having those conversations.
Yeah. Promise we won't send out a contract to make you a leader by any means.
And even if you don't want to share, just thinking about it to yourself is fine. Like, really, what drew you to this workshop?
Like Carol says, that as each of us work on our own wellness, collectively we contribute to a healthier community, opening conversations about wellness in all domains as it fits. I think I've been working on this for years. Most likely, I agree, Carol. Like, I think that's what people, it's not because you have to be in the specific industry. there's multitude of industries that cross paths with wellness. Like I don't even think I could say there isn't one. So many of us have been. Yes, it looks very specific for Paula and I in some ways because we started with that physical wellness, and that's what people traditionally see as wellness. But really, that's been such a small part of what we do now, and that's why we expanded. And that's why when we talk about what we've done, it was that need of knowing that wellness is way bigger than just this little small piece
And
of.
just Hal and Joanne is bigger than Hal and Joanne. That's who I think about those commercials. What was it? Participation,
Yeah,
satisfaction. I don't know what.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it really was about wellness at that time, and I think the 80s was really about the Canada Food Guide and the physical fitness piece. And I think that really left out a lot, and people were missing what they had to offer as well. And they were not looking at things holistically. And this isn't all people, this is just may even have been how the media portrayed things as well.
Absolutely. And I think what we can say about that participation and why it still exists today, there is a piece of it that works. They were absolutely passionate about their belief and participating, getting out there, getting your family, your friends together. So there were pieces that I think they're probably trying to give a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It had its place for sure.
Yeah. And it's just, you're right though, but the 80s and the 90s and the media made it more about looking a certain way. And that's the stigma now that we're trying to change. We're not talking about you need to look a certain way, act a certain way, run a marathon. It's whatever fits within your piece of wellness. That's what becomes the personal piece, but it probably is quite similar to somebody else.
Mhm.
And Carol says, I wonder if more people are motivated about working on wellness / talking about it due to the COVID pandemic. Absolutely. I have to say, just in the research, as does anything, when things happen, it usually drives some change, like we saw about a lot of the long-term care. People didn't really understand who was working in long-term care, what that looks like when you're supporting individuals in that setting. And so, yes, the pandemic has just highlighted so many things, that isolation piece that I'm sure none of us, because we've never had anything happen like it in any of our lifetimes, about just being isolated, sent home to work, actually being told we have to stay home, not even be connected to family if we're not living with them. So yes, absolutely. And now that has driven some change, put some money towards things like the Rural Mental Health Project did start before the pandemic. It just got interrupted a little bit with it. So there was, the driving change was there. It did, I think it truly did just highlight it, bring all these things to the forefront, that life is more, and that's why we say it's more about work-life balance. It's about life. And then how do we fit in all the pieces?
Absolutely. And I know for myself, when I was writing these questions, it was a little bit of how I came to this place thinking, and, do I want to be a leader in wellness? What does that mean to me? And so some of these questions are just for you to ponder before we move on. And we are going to come back to some of this, but looking at leaders in general, because when we're looking at wellness leaders and asking the question, do you have something to contribute? It doesn't have to be that I want to teach a fitness class, or, it doesn't have to be in a box. It can be anything from, I want to teach a cooking class. I want to start a good food box or something like that. It always starts with an idea and motivation.
And we have some good things in the chat too. Kendra was saying that she felt like so many individuals struggle in various aspects on their own lives, and so many don't know how to maybe get out of that funk. So true. Or things that can help to get them out of that. And whether that be financial planning or just a little daily exercise or support group, you name it. There are all so many things that we can do to help. We don't need to stay in a place of not being happy or balanced. And if Kendra could help others try to get in there, she's so in, which is awesome.
And she said the word support group, which is one of our favorite things.
Yeah,
We've ran a support group for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And so we've seen, we still have some of the same people that were in this group. And this was geared to caregivers who are caring for children with complex needs. And so we've seen these caregivers grow and develop relationships. And now many of them are starting to become leaders in the groups as well. And it's just amazing to see. So yeah, support groups are something that we definitely get excited about.
And we had another comment that I'm a dance teacher and have many kiddos in different stages in their life. Just the past year and a half have looked more like a wellness journey and not just dance. Absolutely.
Oh, I imagine.
That's
great.
Kendra says she started her own support group. I love it. For infertility based on experience is definitely a learning curve for me. Absolutely. And isn't that typical, right? When we have our own experiences, what a great thing, because it becomes more authentic when you're coming to the table with that. And we come to the table with our support group in that same idea of learning. I'm learning from families, because we can have all these great patented answers of things we've seen across the years with complex kids. But sometimes there's always something new that comes along. So that's so great to hear that coming from a family, a great inspiration of how they manage something and being able to pass that along. And I'm sure, Kendra, in your experiences, to be able to pass along the true authenticity of how it feels when you're in that situation, that's such a great, powerful thing when people feel like it's not just them. They're not isolated.
Absolutely.
Something. What a great thing. And I see Janet just has her hand up. Janet, did you have something?
I just want to say, sorry, I just want to say one more thing. Oh, sorry, Janet. I just wanted to say something in response to Kendra's group as well. I imagine that was an interesting learning curve around wellness or around leadership also, because at the beginning, when you start a group, you have to almost be a facilitator and not just part of the group. I'd love to hear at a later time if you don't want to share tonight, but just if you've seen any changes around being able to maybe share that leadership role amongst the group as things developed. Sorry, Janet, I'll let you chat. She has her nice little hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess there's so many things that come into factor here. It's just amazing as you're talking. I'm picking out all these different thoughts and agreements and all sorts of things. And even when you're talking about that participation, I'm thinking, you know what, that really motivated me to an extent. So that's some kudos. They did what they needed to do. And there was an evolution, I think, happening. And it's just like in something like racism, where everything becomes intersectionality. And so you were talking about how it's more collaborative, it's more holistic, and we're all connected and intertwined in so many different ways. And so it's sort of like without that connectedness, we can't improve. We can't move on. We can't, even on an individual basis or an overall community. So it's just kind of fulfilling to hear that everything is connected, and it's just building and affirming what I've been learning in this past little while, like with servant leadership and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to say, I think the biggest thing for the community responsibility, that first question that you had, that the improvement would mean less people fall through the cracks. And so I think that with the COVID piece, that's happened, that there's been some people that have actually fallen through the cracks and things have gotten worse. So it's kind of, I think that's even bigger now than it's been before, even when you're talking about caregivers and how they can feel isolated and support and stuff like that. And then, of course, do you have something to contribute? Like support, leadership, knowledge, what I do know. But biggest piece is to support and lift, I think. Give a helping hand up kind of thing. And then the
Absolutely.
inspiration, the biggest inspiration I find, because I'm on the committee, I'm on the LADS committee and some other committees. And I think the biggest thing is there is people that are just repeated. Okay, they're going to do it. Even with my being part of the Lions Club, there's always the certain people that follow through. But the inspiration, I think, is really going back to what are we doing? Where is that purpose? And if there's other people that are wanting to be part of that, that inspires me. The more people that are joining in with me, that just feels so, it just gives so much more strength.
Mhm.
It does. It lifts you up when you start, whether it's you inspiring them to come, somebody else inspires, but you're all collectively coming together for a common purpose. And if that means, like you said, we've exposed some gaps, like, we've exposed some big ones in this past year and a half for sure, which is, I think, awesome, because it's about dialogue, right? If we're not having a conversation, we're not making any changes, and we're not learning from any of it.
Well, and I think that word, that was a key word, Shannon, is expose the gaps. The gaps were already there.
Mhm.
It's just we're in a different stage. We've never been in this situation in the world before. So it uncovered some things that were already there. And I think there's a sense of almost urgency in some people, that we don't want those gaps to get filled in again. We need that to come to light so we can actually address that and do something about it, because that would be to go through a worldwide pandemic and have all these things come to light and then just cover them back up um, would be absolutely horrible. I can't think of a good enough word to use, but yeah, it would be very disappointing.
And I think it's such an opportunity because our kiddos are watching now what we do and how we manage those gaps and how we manage people, how we reconnect, because now this is a big piece of their history that they'll be taking with them. So this is an opportunity as leaders, or even getting kids to become leaders, to pull ourselves out of that, get reconnected, teach those vital things that will make a total difference, that we don't leave anybody behind. We, like Paula says, we don't just cover up those gaps again. We say, hey, we understand that, but we are modeling to those kiddos right now on how we manage that.
I think, should we take a 5-minute break till we move on, before we move on to the community responsibility piece? So it is 6:30. It's probably almost 6:30 or 5. So we'll just take a break till 6:40 and go grab a drink or whatever you need to do, and we will be back shortly. ourselves well.
Right.
Oh, no, that's okay. We do have a responsibility to ourselves to be able to work on our own personal wellness, because it helps us to be able to handle our challenges and cope with stressors and all of that. And then the community piece is just that bigger, broader version of that. And it really does create, the idea is to be able to create that vibrant community where everyone is participating. This brings me to think a little bit about when my kids were young, and I would volunteer for things. And I started to realize as the kids got older, and I started volunteering when they were young and maybe in kindergarten, and then all of a sudden it's like years later, it's still the same 10 people that are coming out. And I think about this in the communities as well, is that there's these pockets of people that are doing all these things, these really good things. But it's really can be a challenge to get new people involved. And we really want to be able to maybe talk a little bit about how do we build these assets within our communities? How do we add people to these small pockets to see them grow, so we're not always seeing the same 10 people, because sometimes in small rural areas as well, is though those 10 people are in all the pockets. So they're the ones that are, volunteering for Communities in Bloom, and they're volunteering with the Quota Club, and they're volunteering for Breakfast for Learning. There's a lot of the same people that are doing that. And we want to be able to, like we were talking about earlier, really come to the understanding that we all have something to contribute, and it's not just certain people that are in have certain skills that can contribute to a well community.
And I think you bring up two great points. I always talk about Brene Brown because I love her, because she brings up some great pieces about boundaries. Because you're right, we're not asking you to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to answer. I'm sure Kendra, you would think the same thing. It's great to start that support group, but you've got, your own family, your own peers as well, probably even outside of that. So you're not always having the conversation. So what we need to do is build up the community to the pieces that they can give. And that's about our own boundaries though, right? That's the personal responsibility piece. We have to be honest with, okay, I really want to help, but I think I've got about 2 hours a week to help with something, or I've got an hour, so that we don't kind of bite off more than we can chew kind of idea, that we can feel good with something we've started to be able to hand to someone else. And that's about building that community capacity piece as well, so that we're not just seeing the same 10 people. And I think that happens because there's this belief that, oh, if I'm going to commit to Communities in Bloom means I've got to be out there every day making sure those flowers or those gardens are great. No, it's just showing what boundaries that you set for yourself, because that speaks to your own wellness too. And then you can actually give something and contribute something that will be sustainable as well.
And so part of our commitment to the Rural Mental Health Project is to really look at the assets that we have in our rural areas. And it doesn't have to be specific to Waring, which is where we live, but it is communities in our rural areas. And so as we were just talking about building community capacity, that really is what Shannon was just saying, is that we are teaching skills by using existing knowledge and resources to maximize individual and community potential. So I think a lot of that, it stems from having those boundaries as well, because if we're just going to continue on, working, maybe we're working a full-time job and then we're going to volunteer 20 hours a week. We really want to build the capacity by bringing in other people, accessing their knowledge, and use them as a resources to maximize what we have in the community.
Mm-hmm. So, and like we said, these not everything has to be, like we said, a grandiose project, because we know, I know even in the rural mental health, when we're doing the training, people are talking about pathways, and we have some lovely pathways here in Wainwright, but we're also talking millions of dollars to make that happen. So that's not always something that can happen, even if everybody got out their shovel and was willing to do, a few feet of that path. That still might not be the best use of the resources. So maybe there's something else we could do that over time, a group gets together because they want to create some different paths or accessibility things. And then we're bringing the right people to the table that could also, provide maybe some of the resources that somebody has a backhoe, or don't quote me on my machinery because I'm not so sure on that one, but whatever kind of machinery they would use to make a pathway, and bringing everybody to the table. So it's not $1 million price tag, but it doesn't mean that it always has to be something that big. I am confident in what we learned from, as we had said before, even about our support group, as small as it started, and it is growing again, and is growing again this year. That it just started off as something small, just a conversation we were having, and this family had a lot to bring to the table, had experienced a lot with their kiddo, and we wanted to share her knowledge and her experiences. Not to say that we totally understand, we're going to tell you how and you should manage that, but we're going to give our input as well. But she had so much to share for other families, and now she is kind of the basis of that group that keeps it going. And in times, she's had some rough times as well with her families and with the kiddo that she supports. So sometimes she's got to take the back seat and let other people. And she always says that she comes out feeling way better than how she came there. And that's the idea. It's something small, but can have a ripple that continues for her 8 years later.
So in December, maybe it was November, we had the opportunity to be a part of Princess and the Purse. It's an initiative that a lady out of Irma is leading. But I say that with, I think she was very much at the forefront of the operation. It is a big operation where she collects supplies for women in need in rural communities, and she fills purses that are donated with these different supplies, and so they give them out to women's shelters. We gave some out to our individuals that we support that maybe are struggling a little bit as far as income or mental health, or have disabilities. And so we got to be a part of that project with her, and it was interesting to see her leadership. She's definitely a leader in the community, but has realized that she needs to let go of the reins and let everyone else play their part, because that is that sustainability for that project. And I think it's something that started out as a very modest pursuit for her, and is really instrumental in the community now. And it was a pleasure to be a part of that. So that is just definitely a good example for community leaders. So just again, some things to think about. How do we know who is a community leader? How do leaders mentor others to be leaders? And how can you be a leader? And I think that the example that I just shared was a good example for these questions, because I don't think that this woman would think of herself as a leader, but she is, because she sees opportunities. She's filling the gap in a lot of these areas, meeting the need of people in rural communities. And I think she's mentoring others to be leaders because she is accepting the support and the help when she needs it also.
And I think even as, that is a big project and a lovely one, because, so many people we support gain a benefit from it. But
Mhm.
another one that we see, because as you know, when our environment looks nice, we do just naturally feel better about it. And with the crazy, crazy winds that we've had, it doesn't matter how nicely you have put your garbage in a bag. It seems that it has blasted them apart, or you're finding your garbage can, I don't know, a half a
Rolling
kilometer
down
away
my
from
alley.
your house,
Yeah.
what it seems. But it just takes, I saw people out, and I know somebody noted it on social media as well. They just took the initiative to go out and start picking up some of that litter that just, because it's nobody's fault per se. Who knew that we're going to have such wind as we have had? And it can just happen in the nature of, as things melt away, we realize things that have been left behind. But just taking that initiative, being that role model to say, you know what, I know how good I feel when my environment looks good. And if I just do my part, I can't do the whole town, but maybe I can do 100 feet behind where I live, and, near a park. I can take care of that part, which may just inspire somebody else to take on the next maybe 25 feet, because that's what they have time for. So it's just sometimes those smaller things that also have a great impact
Being
too.
role models
Mm-hmm.
for the community. And this actually makes me think about the example that we've used in the past, Shannon, where we had talked to a mom, and her child was having some issues at school, and he was sent home. And instead of punishing him for something that was out of his control, especially, but she decided that she was going to teach him how to be take pride in his community. And so she had him out behind Walmart picking up garbage, and she did not just look or stand back and watch him do it. And often we have that feeling where we want to teach kids a lesson, but her way of teaching a lesson was basically to it brings me to think about what you said, Janet, that servant leadership, right? She was working alongside him, picking up the garbage. And by the end of their couple hours that they did that, they were able to see what they had accomplished, and they could see the area that they had cleaned. And I think those are just such simple ways. And I don't think we often realize what the power that we have when we are role modeling to others. And I think it's important to remember that it's that informal leadership that we talked about at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And what I truly like in that too, it moves away from that authoritarian piece.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about this of understanding the difference when somebody is mandated or made to do something, or somebody is brought to the table in a choice. So, their commitment to that can look vitally different. And when we're walking alongside it, as opposed to saying, this is what you should do. And we've learned that in supporting families, supporting individuals. That's great that maybe we have some great ideas that would work well for them. But if we're not listening to them and we're just telling, very rarely is that a successful outcome, we'll just say, for them. But when we're just going along saying, hey, why don't we pick this up? It's such a concrete way to see such a simple task can just make your world look so much different. And I think I
Mhm.
did refer to that earlier, that even with our high-risk kiddos that we used to work with in Calgary, that was the premise of our volunteer program, was to get them to feel connected to their community, to be volunteering, connect to the people, so they're seeing them face to face. You are less likely to vandalize or do something that is negative within that environment if you feel connected, if you feel something for that environment, regardless of what your capacity is. Even if you don't have great impulse control, there is still a more primal sense of connection that gets you to question whether that's something you should do or not.
Mhm. Absolutely. So some of the characteristics that we pulled up for successful community leaders are characteristics that so many of us have, and it's just being able to cultivate that and building on that. So integrity, courage, commitment. I think some of the examples that we talked about show a lot of this already. It is scary to put yourself out there, and I think what I I have definitely realized is that we're all in the same boat. Many of us have the same um, concerns about putting ourselves out there. And I think once you take that first step, or you maybe have someone come with you and be a part of it. If you have a friend come with you and be a part of whatever initiative you are getting involved in, it's it's helpful that way. And then you're walking the path together.
And I think because we've taught virtues for quite some time as well, and this is really calling upon some of those virtues that we know
Mm,
that are just instinctively within us. And sometimes we have to call upon that bravery to have the courage to go and do what we need
absolutely.
to do. And if that's calling upon a support person to do that and take that first step, that's great. Or if we are that support person, that's a great way to be a leader as well. But I do think if you're going to lead, an absolute necessity is that flexibility, and the creativity gives you, when things don't go maybe as we intended them to go, if we can have that flexibility piece to adjust or realign, because maybe there's different people coming to the table now, and then we can call upon that creativity to say, okay, I've got another idea. What about this? What do you think? And then having that dialogue again. But if we don't
Yeah,
have the flexibility, right, we can get really stuck and streamlined into something that maybe not going to work for everyone. So,
and then I think it's that sustainability piece. Sorry, Shannon, that just made me think about all the things that have gone wrong during our support group. It usually is centered around technology, but also because we do provide food, and neither of us are really passionate about cooking big potluck style meals. And so it's usually food or technology that were going wrong. And so we did have to learn to be flexible and creative in when we were doing the planning around things, knowing that if we had an agenda when we were developing the doing planning for the group, that oh well, if things don't go exactly the way they're planned, that means that they weren't meant to to go that way. And we needed to be able to be flexible in our thinking and be able to adapt to the situation, because sometimes we get to the group and someone had an extremely trying week, and we had to just scrap our plans and be able to just hold space for those people and allow them to um, connect with the members of the group and get support from them as well. So that is very important. I agree, Shannon.
and it just goes back to that integrity piece, right? We say what we
Awesome.
mean, and then we follow through with that. And it is in that a willingness to adjust and adapt because something different has come up that people need to talk about. If we're going to be inflexible in that, we're probably losing that person right there. So it just became such a vitally important piece to what we were doing.
Absolutely.
So I really liked this definition of leadership as well, because it really talks about, once again, that process of social influence. And if we're seeing anything right now, that is what people are using, various aspects of social influence, whether that be social media, the TV, whatever the case might be, to bring people to the table. And that has looked far different than you go back 20 or 30 years ago. People couldn't just put out something on Facebook and say, hey, show up. Obviously there is, that's taken in caution, right? That you want to make sure that if you're using that type of social influence, that people are coming to the table with the right information, with the right intent, because otherwise the whole purpose could easily get derailed very quickly. Certainly not going to be sustainable if we don't bring people to the table that see that same vision to what we're trying to do. But it is the idea that ultimately you're looking towards the achievement of some type of goal. That doesn't mean that goal is become stagnant. It's got to be always evolving because society's
It's
evolving.
dynamic.
Yes,
It's a
absolutely.
dynamic process.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great word because it has to move with the times. As our generations come along, they want different things, and that's the key to as we evolve, that the next generation is taught by us. So we have to allow them the space for that growth, even if we don't always understand it, because it's not maybe exactly what we were taught. We give them the history, but now they have the ability to leap even beyond us.
So we want to have you use your annotate button or put it in the chat again if that's not working, or unmute yourself and just let us know what you're thinking. But when we're looking at who are the leaders in your community, you don't have to necessarily put names. It could be the pastor of the Pentecostal church. He's one that's been a very strong leader in our community. It could be teachers, like whoever you think are leaders in your community and who maybe are looked to when there's something that needs to be done. If you want to just maybe jot down a couple, that would be great.
And I think, it was brought up earlier in the chat box that one of the people who were teaching dance, and maybe you don't think of yourself as a leader, but it is certainly in a position of being able to influence people. And, I think, like you said, it was, more of a wellness journey. It's sometimes less about dance and more about the learning of who you can become in that environment.
And how you can mentor the students to be successful on their paths as well.
Mm-hmm. Just teaching somebody to be kind to the person in class with them, or be tolerant, be generous with them, all of those kind of things teach so much. Yes, Kendra, absolutely. ParentLink has been a great resource for so many. And I've known lots of the people that have worked down there and have really supported lots of families and lots of kiddos. And yeah, they've been an awesome resource. And I agree. Like, I think this is kind of the messaging around, often these leaders are volunteers. It's not about a formal position, because yes, church leaders for sure. Like Paula said, most people around here know Pastor Dan. That's how he's referred to as Pastor Dan, because he's been such an integral part of the food bank and all of these great things, youth groups and all of these kind of things. But it doesn't always need a formal title. There's a lot of people that are running that youth group, and Pastor Dan is just known that he has it at his church, but he has a lot of just volunteers that actually make sure that goes every day, just like the people that walk in the doors every week, pick up very heavy boxes of food, and making sure that they're getting out to people as well.
We had a lady in our community, and unfortunately COVID really took a toll on her idea, but she really was inspired to be able to find a space and hold a community clothing swap, or people could come in and they could just, if they needed clothing and they didn't have any money to drop in the collection box, that was fine. And she also, the reason why I got to know her a little bit is because she came to our organization and asked if we had anyone that wanted to volunteer, because she knew that was important as well for many people that are looked at as marginalized in the community, or who have fallen through some of the cracks or the gaps. They want to be a part of something because they often have so much to give as well. And so it was really unfortunate that with COVID she was unable to continue, and I'm hoping soon that she'll be able to open up again a little bit more, because it was just such a well-rounded initiative. A coach of a team, yes, absolutely.
Yes, and Kendra also brought up about the Wainwright on Wellness. For sure. They've had some great impact on our kiddos, and they also do lots of teaching for the teachers as well, to bring that whole aspect, because our teachers, right, they actually could be added to this as well. They've got the role of teaching kids the academic side of things, but they're a bit like the dance teacher as well. Often they're teaching more about life, and then the other part becomes secondary. Alberta Health Services, yes, for sure. The PCN is, another one. They're just currently in a position of doing some work around focusing on the mental health and well-being of children from, I believe it was the age of 12 up to the age of 25, really looking for some of, how they can support, maybe if there are some gaps, but also really just supporting that in and within the community. Often our families, that I support are told, well, you could always go to Calgary. They have a great psychologist or something down there. Well, that always is coming from a person that doesn't understand what the drive is and what that actually means. Maybe that is an awesome person down there, but it's going to create more challenges for the family than the things that they could get out of that.
Absolutely. And we have some on our screen here: teachers, grandparents, outreach workers, and then I can't read the other word.
Because it crosses, yeah. I'm not 100% sure. The trainers.
And
Yeah.
I also like the comments that the new vision of leadership today is so different than compared to many years ago, less about a title and more about doing something. And I think that's very true. We see that so much in the community.
And when we were looking up definitions, that was actually one of the key pieces. It's not about people with titles. It's not about people with big paychecks. That's not what we're talking about. I'm not taking away from any of those that do all of those things and make that kind of money. It is, but we're just trying to broaden that scope of what a leader means within the community. We don't always
Absolutely.
need to look to those people. Often those people are looking to the people, like I said, around the table because they're coming with their piece of expertise.
Yep, absolutely. People that are part of service clubs are definitely leaders, and they do a lot of work behind the scenes to provide children with opportunities, provide people that are in difficult situations.
Yes. Well, move that over. Yes, I was just, that hit me about, even people that work on like the Fire and Wheels out here. They are so active in supporting the firefighters because some, those are also leaders within our community, often volunteers, putting themselves at risk to support other people.
Absolutely. I want to save that, Shannon, maybe, unless anyone else has anything.
We put the Alberta Health
Right.
Services on here. I'll just throw
Oh,
in
sorry.
HS, whoops, S, and I'm going to put the PC in that comment as well.
And then FCS
Okay.
and FCS is Wainwright. I agree, Janet. Laura Lee Marin she's very inspirational. I worked with her years and years ago when we had smoke-free Wainwright, when we were trying to develop some smoking bylaws. And yeah, she's a very inspirational woman.
So I'm going to clear all of that.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say that, like with the FCSS or whatever it is in other municipalities, I say that because they give that opportunity for the change, and they throw it out there for people to, like for the grants and everything like that. And they want to see the change, and they want to see the collaboration. So I think that's like the one of the biggest things to help to motivate and get leaders to become leaders.
Absolutely.
And I find often that the people that are working in offices such as family and community services, they truly walk the talk. They're not just in it for a paycheck. And we often send individuals down there that are looking for some supports that we're not sure where they fit or who can help them, because often they're able to get their questions answered in a place like FCSS. So as we were talking about earlier, the gaps that have been uncovered. Who typically falls through the gaps? I think who we typically think falls through the gaps, we're seeing that there are more people that are falling through the gaps than we once thought, because it was COVID, especially like we were saying earlier, has shined some light on those areas. And we're noticing that it is not just the people that we once thought. It's the people that are marginalized, maybe lower income, in high stress jobs. There's people from all walks of life that are falling through the gaps. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that. Shannon, sorry.
I was having a great conversation the other day. Just, when we look to our frontline workers, our nurses and doctors and volunteers that were at the hospitals and things like that, they just witnessed things that they had never seen either. But we're asking them to continue. Our paramedics, we're asking them to continue and go, pick up people, get them to the hospital as fast as possible. But we also see them as these strong people, but yet they are still just people, witnessing many things that they could not have imagined before now. So I do believe that we'll see gaps like that maybe we thought never existed as well.
Yeah, because I imagine a lot of those people saw things that were, out of what I can comprehend before COVID as well, and that was not necessarily being acknowledged either. We often don't offer support to those in supportive fields as well. I can imagine that a lot of the frontline workers in seniors' homes and even daycares, for example, a lot of those people weren't mentioned, but those workers were on the the front lines, often at the end of the day, having to support families that have, now someone's tested positive in their work, and now we have to do, A, B, and C, and we don't know how we're going to do that, and we have to take our child out of daycare. Like, there's so many people that something like the pandemic has affected, but also those people were picking up a lot of the pieces and carrying heavy loads before the pandemic as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, when we give titles like heroes and things like that, all meant with great intent, but it's also a very big role to try to fulfill every day because we're human beings, right? So I think that as we move along, it's going to take a whole lot of people wrapping around areas that maybe we hadn't thought of before, because we put these titles on people to live up to. And right down to, like you said, the daycare workers are the people going to Walmart and facing people, hundreds of people every day, and that fear and anxiety that can come along with that. And so we may need to call upon our creativity to really find other gaps that we can connect to, right? We have something to bring to the table with.
Absolutely. Well, I can't even speak anymore. Apparently, people in the service industry, such as people working at restaurants and Walmart, they get the brunt of a lot of people's end of the day, can't take anymore type attitudes, and they are expected as part of their work to be able to continue on with a smile on their faces. And I think that a lot of those people really were hit hard as well during the pandemic, and I think they probably have challenges again in their everyday work, because they are on the other side of the counter, where people often don't realize that they're closing themselves off. They're not acknowledging the people behind the counter. They're not giving them a hello, how is your day? And I think that's maybe how we can look at opening up or addressing those gaps, is thinking about things a little bit broader and how we can connect people in the community. We were fortunate enough to sit in a meeting with someone from the Cornerstone Co-op, and that's what they're addressing right now, is how can they connect to the community, and how can they support their staff with their wellness and address community wellness. And so it was really interesting to be a part of that, because they're definitely thinking outside the box and thinking of the broader community and how they can play a role. And we were excited to have them at the table, because often when we're sitting, because we are in the human services as well, when we're sitting in meetings or interagency type meetings, it is people that are in similar career paths. And so then to bring someone else in, one gentleman that sits on the impact committee with us is from the Ford dealership, and the co-op is now, and I think that is one way to connect us, that it's not, because it's breaking down those silos. We're not all working on the same thing in isolation. We can now expand and work together.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way of just calling out and calling upon some of the people. And just like I had referenced earlier, talking to the animator from the Banff area, and one area that she's connecting with is the new immigrants, because so many are have found work out into areas like Jasper and Banff. But with that other level of having to have English, they're landing here often with not a lot of English, so it's very hard to get jobs and move up from those jobs. And just they're also without their support system. So she just wants to create some connection as well, because they're obviously providing a very big service for any of us that like to be a tourist in the area. But they also need that sense of connection. And there's so many other expectations on them, that having that place, just like our support groups, to be able to talk about some of those challenges of coming to a new country, what it's like to live, in a totally different world that looks so different, without your family and friends.
So where do we begin? I guess we need to delve into this a little bit before we're done for the evening, but because we're still, all of the things we talked about are important to address and to think about a little bit differently. And then when we go back to our regular everyday lives and routines, how do we connect to our communities, and how do we become leaders in our own little circles, or again, broader in the broader community? And I think, again, we like to go back to that nourishing ourselves and building ourselves up. It's that we talk about this a lot, that oxygen mask philosophy is that you have to make sure that you're safe and that you're well before you can support and help others. So that is, to us, that really is the foundation of becoming leaders, is really doing that for yourselves. And maybe it is just trying to expand your wellness in a different way. If you don't have the ability to grow a big garden, it's maybe some small garden boxes that you can put on outside your house or your apartment or on a balcony. My son lives in Montreal, and I think his balcony is almost covered with plants. He was growing everything from raspberries, blueberry bushes, strawberries, all in little pots on his balcony. Unfortunately, the squirrels have been digging some of them up, but squirrels that are as big as cats.
Yes,
but yeah, I think it is just pushing those boundaries of what we often think, well, you can't do that because it doesn't fit within that mold or that box, and it is challenging those beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it does go back to, like we said, a little bit about those boundaries as well. When you set good boundaries, then people know what to expect from you and what you're capable of doing without impacting your own mental health and well-being. But you need to learn about it a little bit more too. We all do, because it's, like we said, it's evolving. So we need to learn about our own, where we're sitting on our wheel. If there's areas that maybe need to be bumped up a little bit in order for us to help other people, that's okay. That's why we don't want to be the only leader in the community. We want to be able to kind of tap out when we need to, and then tap back in when we're ready to be a part of it again.
And I think we talked about ideas and inspiration before, and then talked about who are leaders in the community already. And sometimes it's taking those ideas that we have, connecting to people that are already leaders, or have the capacity to maybe, like, for example, what I'm thinking is the family and community services. So if you have an idea and you just don't know how to get started, and it's maybe calling up someone at the FCSS office to say, hey, I have this idea. Do you know who I can speak to? Or is there anyone in your office that would be able to support this project? And like something like a collective kitchen or a community garden, or expanding the farmers market that we have in Wainwright. I know there's quite big thriving farmers markets in other areas, so it's connecting with those people that are already doing it to maybe they can support you in your ideas to get initiatives started in your community.
And even, I know in some areas they've started an app for community gardens so that people can share their piece of a garden. So it's not actually a
Oh,
community garden. Somebody says, oh, I've got my garden's too big. I'm only going to use this much. And then there's this app that they can connect with other people, and they can use up the other spaces. And then they do a bit of a vegetable swap. So
oh,
if you,
that's really interesting.
yeah, if you grew
I'd
tomato
like to
carrots,
actually connect with people who want to maybe maintain my garden and
yeah.
weed it, but no, just kidding. But that's awesome. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. So like we said, it's
And
making good choices and educating ourselves on how to create and sustain community wellness. Um, Being a leader is always about learning. And that's why we like that little video piece, because
mhm.
you need to be coming to the table willing to learn all the time. I always keep my ears open of hearing something new, because I learning is somewhat insatiable for me. I can never learn enough. I love hearing about other ideas, and how maybe we can tweak them and they work a little bit better in this area, but then being willing to share that onto the next area.
Mhm.
Yes, Janet was just saying about the mini libraries. Yes, we've talked lots about the book sharing. We had ideas even in the winter about sharing sleds and things like that, because sometimes you end up with extra sleds or things like that. Your kids have moved on. Just having a community box that, hey, you need a sled for the day while you're sledding down that hill, but then you put it back for somebody else to use. So yes, and
Well, because in the cities, they often have those because they obviously have a pool of people that they can draw from that can run those different things. But I'm thinking about Montreal because I was looking for a bike, and my son was able to they have those bike share programs in the city where you pick up a bike from one location and you drop it off at another location. And even like the book shares, board game shares, things like that. It takes manpower to be able to sustain those things, but they're definitely worth the conversations because for me to just think over these things and ponder these things in my head, often I end up ruminating on them and I end up going in a circle. And then as soon as I have a conversation with someone else, and Shannon and I do this all the time, we'll start having a conversation and then it just blows up with all these things that we could do and possibilities. And that's so exciting. And I think that's really, that's where we can grow the wellness within our communities.
And I agree, Janet. Looking like to a Nelson lumber that is so big and prominent in Lloyd, that's something that would be so easy. They have ends of pieces of wood all the time as
Mhm.
they build homes, so it's not a big ask of them. So it's coordinating those kind of pieces that we can't put a big cost necessarily on anybody, especially right now with businesses that haven't been open all year long. But sometimes there's things that are just sitting around, and it's once again calling upon that creativity to say, oh, I bet you they've got a little bit of extra wood. They've got carpenters on site. Maybe they'd be willing to do this piece, but we'll take over the management of them. And so you never know what you can do.
Well, and I know talking in our office, this was before COVID as well, but we talked a lot about environmental wellness in our office with our coworkers. And so we talked about having a purse swap or having a shoe swap or having a, bring your summer clothes that you don't want anymore and we'll do a clothing exchange. And all those things are, I think they're important to community wellness. And usually when you start that in one small piece of your life, you start talking about it to someone else and you start talking about it to someone else. And then they're having those swaps and exchanges, or else you're having one big exchange. And those ideas really do blossom and grow. And I think they're important conversations that we need to be having. Before we end for the night, though, we'd like to talk a little bit about our mental resource hub. And this is on our personal website, but it is a piece of the World Mental Health Project that we want to be able to develop this mental resource hub that is not just targeting like the doctors or the addiction workers. Of course, they're important, but we also want to target the lady who's running the free clothing drive, or the Communities in Bloom network of people in the communities. And so we're hoping that you would take a moment of time to be able to, if you think of people that could be connected to this mental resource hub, or you yourself have a social media site or a support group or something like that, and you want more information on this mental health resource hub, please send that information to us. We'd love to share that space with you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Assertion.
I was just going to say, yeah, before we go, kind of thing. Yeah, if you want to email us or use the contacts on the website as well. If you know people or you have your own information, never think anything is too small or too out there, because there's always some other person that is in need of that. And I think that's the one thing we've learned around the table. Once the conversation starts, it's like Paula said, it usually excites others to think, oh my goodness, we could really use that too. So please, send anything along. Nothing's too small.
Absolutely. And if you have any additional ideas that you're thinking about after this webinar and you want to chat with us, please send us an email and we'd love to connect and talk about things a little bit further.
Mm-hmm. But to keep things on timeline, we don't want to take up any more of your evening. We really appreciated your insights and input. It's like I said, that's always, we find that so inspirational when we bring people and they bring their ideas to the table. So like Paula said, if you have more, please keep them flowing. We're always interested.
Mm-hmm.
We'd love to hear about it. And we really appreciate you coming out tonight. And I know some of you joined us in the noon hour session earlier today, where we started the 8 dimensions of wellness. And then tomorrow we'll be doing the Workplace Wellness 101, what we call it. And once again, that's really trying not to make that distinction between the work-life balance that we hear so often, but we're going to talk about what wellness looks like in the workplace and how we incorporate that whole balance of life within the workplace. And then, of course, the following Monday, I think some of you have already been sent the link. If you came to the one today, it'll just be that second half of the 8 wellness domains. And then one more
Self-kindness.
is self-kindness. I usually say the wrong name, but it should be a fun one too.
And then after, so this is, like we said, the first webinar installment of our Rural Mental Health Project. And so we will be doing 10 webinars and 15 podcasts.
I believe so, yes.
And so we will have those out on our website shortly, and as well on our social media, Instagram and Facebook. So look for those, and we would love to see you guys back to join us in those future webinars.
And just one more thing, we'll be sending out just an evaluation tool that we like to have to get your insights. If there's things that we could add that would be, add even more information, please let us know on that evaluation. We much appreciate your feedback on that too, so that we are always looking to improve what we're offering.
Awesome. Well, have a great night and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes, thank you.